Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my webinar on cottage properties. My name is Mark Weisleder, and I'm delighted to be here with you today to share with you some things you need to know whenever you are considering buying a cottage property. So I'd like to say a little bit about myself for those who haven't heard me speak before. I am a real estate lawyer. I've been doing this for a long time. I've written best-selling books for real estate agents, buyers, sellers, and landlords. I've been a guest real estate expert on TV and radio. I've been quoted in all the national newspapers on real estate issues, and I'm a senior partner with Realestatelaywers.ca, LLP. A little bit further, here are the books that I've written. My landlord guide has everything a residential landlord needs to know, especially all the rules when selling a property occupied by a tenant, all rights of landlords and tenants. In the pandemic, if anyone is interested in ordering any book, just contact me at mark@realestatelawyers.ca. A little bit about our firm. We still continue to sign most of our clients in a Zoom meeting using DocuSign, and as a result, the client does not need to travel to sign any closing paperwork. And if you're not comfortable on Zoom, we will still go to your home to sign you up in person. And as a result, I can close a deal anywhere in Ontario, including Muskoka, Windsor, Niagara, and Ottawa, besides, of course, the Greater Toronto area. For realtors, we pay real estate commission the same way we pay our sellers. The day after closing, with an electronic funds transfer right into your bank account, so there is no hold by your bank. And if you are buying a property, we make it very easy. We are, to my knowledge, the only law firm that's a bill payment at all the major banks. So the same way you pay a hydro bill online, perhaps by just adding hydro as a bill payment, you can add our law firm as a bill payment and just pay us the closing balance right from the comfort of your own home online. We advise everyone, as soon as the deal is registered on the day of closing, clients get a report, including all the documents emailed on the day of closing. We provide lock boxes for sellers so they can leave the keys when they leave the home the last time. And I'm always available for support and advice if you have any questions before or during the term of your agreement. People ask me about fees. I always say check online. Our fees are very transparent. And I note to people that other law firms may charge a software conveyancing fee of an additional amount of up to $249 plus HST. We do not charge this to our clients. I want to be careful to say that although I'm trying to give you advice, this isn't legal advice in here. If you have any questions, you should, of course, speak to your lawyer, but I'm also available, and there is my contact information, my toll-free number, direct number, and email. That's the easiest way to always reach me, mark@realestatelawyers.ca. So our agenda today will be as follows. We'll talk about what's unique about a cottage property, the home inspection condition, chattels and fixtures, access. How do you get to the cottage? The well, is the water drinkable and sufficient for household use? The septic system, where is the tile bed and is it working? How do you check this? Shore road allowance, what is this and who is the owner? What are the rules regarding docks and boathouses, wood burning appliances? Are they safe? And the importance of a survey in a cottage purchase. So there's a lot to cover, but a lot of it does sort of follow the same pattern. And it's about clauses you need to include and the research you need to do in advance when you are buying a cottage. So, as you know, many people have chosen to live in cottage country because it is small town life, and especially during the pandemic, the ability to work remotely is a key consideration in many people's choice of jobs these days. So finding a cottage where they can enjoy this and work is really a wonderful thing for many people to do. But some of the lessons, you have to learn the local community that you're interested in. And very important that you become acquainted with the local building department, because every building department is different. So for example, what will you require to have a simple dock or a boathouse put in at your property? Are there any shore road allowances, which I'll explain? And can these be closed and purchased where you are searching for a cottage? Very important that you get to know the local building department. So with most home purchases, the home inspection condition is, of course, very important, but more so in a cottage. You really have to find a local inspector who understands those kinds of cottages, what to look for, and all the town bylaws that go into building a cottage. And this inspector should also be able to recommend others to assist when you have to inspect things like the well or a wood stove or the septic system. They should have connections to all the experts you need to make sure that you are, satisfied and you have done the proper due diligence when looking for a cottage. And so this is how I recommend you word a home inspection condition. And so as with everything, you want to make sure it's in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion, and that it's an inspector that's doing everything, checking for a certain number of days. And however days you pick, you have to check in advance. How long is it going to take for an inspector to get there? And then, because we're going to have several conditions in this agreement, you may want them to all line up. So if it's going to take 5 to 10 days to have all of these things inspected, try to be consistent in the date of all of these inspections to make sure your inspectors can get there in time. When it comes to chattels and fixtures, we always say that, list everything. So there's no ambiguity at closing. And it's very important in a cottage, because in a cottage, you may want more things than you would typically ask for when you're buying a home. And so here, be very specific. So, window coverings, curtains, blinds, drape, light bulbs, mirrors, ceiling fans, fireworks, patio furniture, paddle boats. Sometimes people buy the furniture that's in the cottage. And so when you're buying things, it's important that you list everything in your agreement of purchase and sale, so that there's no arguments about anything after closing. So how do you get to the cottage? So in the city, it's pretty simple. You just drive on the road to the front of your driveway and you're there. You have access over a municipal road. It's not always that way in a cottage. In a cottage, many times you have to go from the road over this, what looks like a right-of-way, to get to the property, which means you're traveling over someone else's land to get to the property, not a municipal road. Now, is this access actually registered? Sometimes on an island, you can only get there by boat. And so the question is, what are your rights? Who's going to maintain this road? And you have to do research about this. So in the legal description, when you see the letters TW in the legal description, it means together with. It means that your property has the right to use someone else's property to do something. So if there is a right, let's say, to use someone's property as an easement, it will be there. You'll just have to read it in the document itself. Now, if you're buying a property that has the letters ST in the legal description, this means subject to. That means somebody else has the right to cross your land to do something. So if others have the right to use your land for access, you need to know that too in advance, because then questions arise, who's going to maintain this right of way? And you can't build anything on this right of way. So that's what you need to know. Who is going to maintain it? Is this year-round maintenance, or can you only use the cottage in the summer because there's no one to maintain that road year-round? And in a typical agreement of purchase and sale, the buyer will accept, the minor easements for utilities, which is the phone or for hydro, but they don't accept any access easements. This is why. Any easement for access or for other purposes must be disclosed to every buyer from every seller for obvious reasons. You need to understand these and all your rights. And so always ask, if you see a TW or an ST, what does this mean? So on title, if you're looking at a title, here it says lot 18, plan 4323, but then it says ST. That means that there is an easement on here. We're not sure exactly what it is. We need to do a little bit of research. Sometimes we can find this right on title, and it usually costs a few dollars to pick it up. Many realtors have access to the system. Sometimes they call me to look it up for them. So you want to make sure that you have access to your cottage. So there's two ways to deal with all of these issues. You put a warranty in, and then you have until closing to make sure everything's correct. Or you make the deal conditional. And during the condition period, you have someone find out that this is correct. So there's two ways to handle every one of these issues. So when it comes to access, here's an example. So the seller is saying there is access by automobile with a public road that is maintained throughout the year. So now you have access, public road, city maintains it, you don't have to worry about it. Or you might say that there's a private road, but it's maintained throughout the year. So in other words, the terms of this private road are you don't have to deal with things, it's maintained. So those are two warranties that you would put into the agreement, and then you would check it to make sure it's correct before closing, or your lawyer is going to do that for you. Or you can make it conditional. So here's a condition that says, and we would line it up the same as the home inspection condition that says that, okay, it's conditional on the buyer being satisfied that there is access with a public road, and you make it, and that way the lawyer can assist, or you can go to the building department and check it yourself to make sure you have that access. Or you make it conditional on there being access over a private road, and that it's maintained throughout the year. And this way it's conditional. So during that 5-10 day period, people are doing searches to make sure that you have that access. And then if the condition is not satisfied, then you can cancel the deal. Now we come to the well. So the well is something, of course, water you take for granted in the city. Water comes from the municipal pipes, but in the cottage, it's coming from a well. And so we have concerns here. Is it working, the well? And is it pumping enough water for normal household use? And this is an interesting question, because if two people are living in a cottage, they don't have the same usage as a family of 6 who may be moving in. So you have to check this to make sure. So same thing. What warranty do you have to include? So seller represents and warrants there is enough water to meet the buyer's needs, that the equipment in the well is working and has never broken down, and that the buyer can obtain a sample of the water to prove it's safe from the local health authorities. And again, this warranty goes up until closing, so the buyer has the opportunity to make sure that everything is correct relating to the well. Now, you can also make it a condition. So it's conditional now on the buyer being satisfied that there's adequate water, the pump is working, and you could get the proper sample. And so you see, again, you would want to, for sure, make sure that the seller is giving access so you can do this inspection, but also you would make the deal conditional for the same amount of time as all the conditions, so you can be satisfied in a certain number of days with the condition of the well. septic system. So septic systems, again, it's a new item. Like, we're not on a system with the city and sewers or anything else. So you've got to make sure that the septic system that you have works and that you don't have any leakage or you don't have any environmental problems with the system breaking down. So again, you could put a warranty in the agreement. So you're saying that everything is within the property lines, because you don't know where the septic bed is that discharges everything. Sometimes it's found to be on your neighbor's land. So you want to make sure that you at least have a warranty that everything is within the property limits. It was constructed according to approval, and there was a proper use permit given for the use of the system, and it's been maintained without any issues. And so this is the warranty. Again, you have to check this in order to make sure it's correct. So many people write this as a condition. Same thing, that it's conditional upon an expert inspecting the system to obtain a report that says all these things, that it was working correctly. And you have to have the right of the inspector to pump out the system, because this is probably the only way that the inspector is going to be able to tell that this system works. And again, you make it conditional on up until a certain point. Now, this is very important because many systems were built 20, 30 years ago, and systems don't typically last more than 20 to 30 years. And it's very expensive to replace these systems. Could cost $20,000 or more. And it may not even be possible to put the septic bed where it currently is due to changing environmental rules. So it's really important that you get someone who understands this, who can give you the proper advice regarding the septic system. You know, you could try the company that services the system for the seller. They may have some good knowledge, but also remember to speak to your home inspector to make sure that whether they have someone who they can refer to you as well. Now we come to the shore road allowance, and this is a very important issue for people to understand. So historically, the first 66 feet surrounding a lake was owned by the municipality. And the reason was so that theoretically they could create a road in the future. But really, the goal was so that the public would always have the right to walk across any lake waterfront. And so what this means is that when you buy a cottage that's fronting onto the lake, you don't automatically own the land right in front of your waterfront. In other words, it may not be as private as you think it is. And this is very important to a lot of people. They want that privacy when they buy that cottage. Now, the good news is, in many cases, what we call this 66-foot road allowance can be purchased. So you can actually own it. The way it's done is you get a surveyor, you prepare a survey, and then you get the town to pass a bylaw to permit this to be purchased by you. And lots of times you get neighbors who get together to actually do this for all the cottages in a row so they can have their own privacy at the lake. You see, as an owner, you have the right to go swimming. That's called riparian rights. You can go swimming on your land, of course, in the lake. However, you can't necessarily prevent others from walking across your waterfront. And one of the reasons we want to make sure about this is sometimes in older cottages, they're actually situated right on the road allowance. In other words, they're not even built on land that is owned. It's actually on land that is not owned. So it's so important that you're familiar with this before you purchase, and why a survey is considered even more important when you buy a cottage property. So here's an example on Spider Lake. So you can see from the plan, and these are plans that you can usually see right on title, these plans. So you see that these are the separate cottages right here. They're all sort of with the boundary. So imagine there's 5 cottages here, but there's a road allowance which means that the public can walk right across here, across the front of the property. So in other words, the lakefront is not private. Well, it's possible for each of these owners to get a surveyor and go out and survey all the pieces that front from their property onto the road allowance, close the road allowance, and buy this from the municipality. So you see, if you own this, now you have privacy. And this is one of the searches that have to be done, or you have to be aware of before you buy a property. Does the owner own the land all the way to the lake, or is there a road allowance that would allow others to cross in front of your cottage? Very important. So we put a representation of warranty here that the seller does have a certain amount of frontage on the water, and there's no road allowance of any kind that interferes with the use of that property, no unregistered easements, and this goes on. And you can usually tell, but in the winter, you may not be able to tell if nobody's up there using the waterfront. I also tell people to speak to the neighbors, because the neighbors will also be able to tell you whether they have closed off the water shore road allowance as well. Or you make the deal conditional on finding this, that whether there is frontage and there's no road allowance. And this usually includes a condition. The lawyer will search title and see if they can find that plan that I just referred to that shows the existence of a road allowance. So now you're starting to see why the questions you have to ask before you even make that offer, to make sure you know exactly what you're buying. Now we come to docks and boathouses. This is a picture actually of a boathouse. I thought this was a cottage, but it shows what people are doing up in cottage country. Now, you have to assume that this boathouse may not be on land that you own. So how is it there? Because the lake is owned by the provincial government, the Ministry of Natural Resources. So sometimes you need a permit from the province as well as the municipality to either build a dock or something like this. And sometimes you can buy it, sometimes you lease it for many years. So every town has a different process about how you build a dock, because even a dock, you just can't go out there and build a dock. This could cause accidents at night, people boating. So everything has to have a proper permit. And as a buyer, you may have to have something transferred to you, like a license at closing, because you may not own the land underneath here, but there's a license that allows it to be there, whether it's a dock or a boathouse. Sometimes there's an annual fee payable. These are the questions you need to answer about every dock, every boathouse, because it's not the same. And this is why you need a local inspector and get familiar with the local building department to ask questions. So with the docks and boathouses, this is the kind of representation you need, that everything was approved. Anything you constructed was approved and by everybody that was supposed to. And this goes right up until closing. So again, you're going to check everything, or you're going to make it conditional on the buyer determining that everything in the docks, boathouses was properly approved, and you have those conditions all meet up with your original condition on a home inspection. So it's all the same. We write conditions exactly the same way. The key thing is the date. You want the dates to all be consistent, so you're checking everything. So once you know that everything's good, you're moving ahead with your purchase. Wood burning stove. So there are wood burning appliances, and it's very similar to people who are buying a home in the city with a fireplace, a wood burning fireplace. You want to make sure that these things are safe. And so who decides this, that a wood burning appliance is safe? It's called a wet inspection. So in other words, it's called the Wood Energy Technology Transfer. And so what happens is there are inspectors who have this designation, they're certified, and they will tell you by report that the appliance is successful. So it should say the seller will provide this to the buyer at closing, or you make it conditional on the buyer obtaining this report at their expense themselves. However you do it, it's the same thing. You want to have a report that says any wood burning appliance is safe to use. And this is the end of the condition. Same thing up until a certain date. They have to satisfy yourself that any wood burning appliance is safe. Now we come to surveys. And so it's interesting as to what might happen if a lake recedes. So in other words, you own the land, let's say, to the lake, but now the lake starts to go back, it starts to dry up. So it looks like your land got bigger. Do you own that land when the lake sort of goes back? And the answer is typically the law of accretion. So this is a law that says if it's a natural pullback of the land, the adjoining owner actually owns the land. But it's not so easy to prove, but that is the general principle. But it could be owned by the municipality, because remember, if the shore road allowance is owned by the municipality, so does the land on the other side of the road allowance if the lake recedes, because it could be part of the shore road allowance. But if you bought it and the lake recedes, you will probably be deemed to be the owner of this extra land if the lake goes back. However, sometimes it's ruled that it's owned by the province, and so you may have to buy it. So everything is subject to, and this is one of the reasons why you need to get a proper survey, so you know exactly where the original boundary is, where maybe a road allowance is, and then how much land actually was gained, sometimes lost, depending on whether the lake went back or moved forward for you. Okay, and if it's owned by the province, then we come back to the boathouse. Remember, we're going to have an agreement with the province to be able to use that land for a boathouse, dock, or however you want to call it. So it starts to show why you need a proper survey, especially with a cottage property. So here's an example of a survey that shows that the swimming pool is actually not on your property. You see that? Here's the boundary line, but the fence is here. So when you bought it, you had no idea that the pool was outside the boundary line. And title insurance will protect you for that kind of situation. Title insurance will probably have to buy the land from the neighbor to make sure you can use the entire swimming pool. So title insurance has been said to protect many people when they don't have an up-to-date survey, and everyone should have title insurance even when they buy a cottage. One of the things title insurance will protect, for example, is if you find out after closing that your septic bed is actually encroaching onto your neighbor's land and you didn't know about it, title insurance would have to pay to relocate the septic bed onto your property. So you must have title insurance. However, let's say the cottage was actually built on land owned by the province. It was never owned by the person. Now you may have issues even with title insurance. And so this is why you should always try to have a survey whenever you are buying a cottage property, especially a lakefront cottage property, just to make sure you don't have issues after closing. I believe that a cottage property survey is much more important than any survey in the city, where title insurance will pretty much correct any issue that will arise. And so with that, that brings us to the end of our session. And I hope that you found it helpful. If you have any questions, here is my email address, mark@realestatelawyers.ca. And I encourage you to contact me if you have any issue at any time. So with that, I want to say thank you. And I wish everyone stay safe and have a wonderful summer.